Hello and welcome. If you are enrolled in one of my public speaking classes, this might be your very first lecture. And if you are finding me on YouTube because you're studying before a test or something, then hopefully this will be beneficial to you. So what I'm using today is Screencast-O-Matic. I'm sure it has the icon in a corner or something letting you know that's the screencasting technology I'm using. But as I go through my particular lectures for this course, what I wanted you to know is that there are multiple different free technologies out there for you to utilize, should you choose to help you record your own presentations. Screencast-O-Matic is one of my absolute favorites because it's very user-friendly. It's free if you have videos 15 minutes long or less. You'll never have a 15-minute presentation for me, at least. And it's very useful if you want to demonstrate a visual like what I have here. I have a visual here. I'm the talking head in the corner, but Screencast-O-Matic can do one, the other, or both. I will also be demonstrating Prezi video later in our semester where the focus will primarily be on me and the visual will kind of be a smaller component of the screen. So that way you can figure out what types of technology might be best for you to use. If it's a visual heavy presentation, I recommend Screencast-O-Matic. You can write on the screen, draw, and do all kinds of beautiful technological things. If it is a focus on you as a presenter, I recommend Zoom or Prezi because it will record you more than will record a visual. So that aside, let's jump into it. So foundations of public speaking. This particular lecture is going to be discussing what it is, why we use it, the different components, things to expect a little bit there. So it's essentially an overview chapter. So, with public speaking as a liberal art, it's essentially a fundamental skill. You need to be able to communicate effectively in a public setting in front of people because you will be doing it if you're at the beginning of your college career. You'll have to do it in a lot of different classes, not just speech class. I'll be honest, in my master's degree of professional communication that I worked on, the classes I gave the largest presentations in weren't the communication classes. So go figure. I remember giving presentations in psychology, biology, math class, education courses, background in computer tech. So, public speaking is something you're going to use a lot academically. Moving forward and out of college, public speaking is a skill that most jobs really want their employees to have because there's so much presenting that goes on. And especially now in a very virtual environment, public speaking and the ability to adapt to technology is an absolutely beautiful, marketable skill that will get you money. So, it is also a civic right. Our ability to speak out, whether we're for or against something, is protected by the Constitution. So, this is your freedom of speech. So, if you have freedom of speech, shouldn't you know how to do it well? There are certain things that are not protected by freedom of speech, so you should be aware of that as well. So, it is our right to be able to speak out. It is my recommendation that when you do, you do it well. It also, of course, is a huge encourager of critical thinking because to do public speaking well, you have to have thought about it. You have to have made the connections. You have to learn how to interact and read off of your audience. You need to know who you're talking to and what type of examples to use and what type of technology will be beneficial to them. So it requires a lot of thought and analysis in order to do well. If you're in one of my public speaking courses and you aren't just finding me randomly on YouTube, one of the ways that public speaking will push critical thinking for you is that you're going to be doing a lot of different types of speaking. So you have to be able to take the structure of a presentation and make it match the type of speech you have to give. So, with that, since it is a civic right, since it's a fundamental, marketable, pay me money skill, and it is something that encourages critical thinking, you do have ethical responsibilities. Ethics or the study of ethics is essentially the study of right and wrong. So, when you communicate, and this is where freedom of speech comes in handy, you need to be able to be honest in your communication, have integrity, be fair, have respect, whether or not that you agree with someone. And in my mind, the most important one, take responsibility. Now, honesty, integrity, and fairness and respect are wonderful virtues that I think all of us should endure and love. But I personally hit the responsibility one. You need to realize here at the get go that communication is a choice. And that communication that you use is your responsibility. It doesn't matter how emotionally invested you get. That emotional investment doesn't keep you from having personal responsibility for the communication that you do. So you are responsible for your communication, which again is why we should think critically, be good at it, and be honest and fair and have respect and integrity. I also teach argumentation and debate. And even though we're debating and we're arguing and we are intentionally disagreeing with each other, the whole point is to still be respectful and to have responsibility for the communication you've brought. So, with that, there is a communication model that we do tend to use. There are a lot of different components with this particular model. And the first one is simply the fact that communication itself is shared meaning. In order for communication to be considered effective or successful, you have to have shared meaning. It's called co created meaning. This means that I'm sending out information to you, you're receiving that information, and we both make sense and we're making the same sense, which is helpful. So we do have senders. Right now, I'm in the role of sender. I'm the person who's here sending information into your earbuds, headphones, or whatever it might be. And I'm over here trying to send information to you. You are going to be the receiver where you're accepting that communication. And as we go through that communication, we're sending and receiving messages. So the message is essentially defined as the content that's being communicated, what I'm trying to get across to you. So I'm sending, you're receiving. If you leave me comments or email me, or we Zoom meet, or for a student that I advise, you're going to send messages back to me. And with that, I'm continuing my discussion on the communication model. We're going to do something called encoding and decoding. Encoding is what the speaker does. If you're taking notes or highlighting in your textbook, this would be worth mentioning somewhere. So in my head, before I have done this video, I've had to think through what I want to say, what I don't want to say, what I want to skip, what information I need, and I have to provide that for you. So I'm having to encode as a speaker and program my head for what I want to get out of my face here in just a minute. You, as a listener or a receiver, are decoding. So you're taking in all this information that I'm sending to you and you're putting it through your head and you're seeing if it still makes sense. One of the beauties of virtual learning is that you can pause this and back it up and listen to it again and see if it makes sense, or pause it till you find your place in your notes, your textbook. So instead of it being a live lecture where you have to pace at my pace, you are in control of your decoding speed. So if this is going too quickly for you, because I try to keep my videos relatively short, you can just hit pause, figure out where you're at in the book, finish your note, go back, listen to it again, give yourself an example, and then hit play so that you make sure that your decoding is really accurate. Now, feedback is what I mentioned before about you might end up turning from a receiver into a sender and sending me some feedback. In a live class, I would have verbal and nonverbal components. So eye contact, nods, smiles, raised hands, questions, people falling asleep in the back, whatever it might be, there's some interaction there where I have immediate feedback. In a virtual learning environment, I pretty much have the cold, heartless eye of my webcam to stare into, so there is no feedback right now. In my head, I can tell myself, you're going too fast, slow down. But then I can also tell myself, yeah, but you don't want to keep this video an hour long. So there's that battle going on all the time. My feedback is me giving it to myself. So if you do reach out to me via email or comments, it's always appreciated because I enjoy having the information on the videos. Now, the channel that you use could be compared to the channels on your television or your streaming service, where you have a lot of different channels you can access for different types of entertainment. A channel in communication is essentially the method used to communicate. So the channel I'm using right now would be a video that I've used or built using a screencasting software. So right now you have a video, you have a PowerPoint, you have my face. You won't always have my face on these PowerPoints. I just tend to pop in from time to time. It could be a letter, email, text message, phone call, smoke signal, whatever it is, whatever you've used to communicate, the method you've used to communicate is referred to as your channel. Now, I'll go ahead and tell you that this particular slide is packed full of beautiful things that I will pick for a future exam. So make sure that you know all the elements of the communication model for your exam in my class, because I will always quiz you on these different elements. The last thing that kind of hits in with a communication model is noise and interference. And we're 10 minutes in perfectly into this video, so I have probably lost you on your attention span at least once by now. You've probably drifted off at least once and had to come back. And that noise and interference could be internal, it's like psychological noise. It could be a hungry stomach, but it really could be psychological noise where you might be bored, you might be tired, you might find my hand gestures distracting, you might be wondering why my couch is covered, wash it over the shoulder, with a sheet. A cat might have walked through the background. My cats do that all the time. So there are always things competing for our attention. If you are listening to this at, let's say, a Starbucks, you're in the lobby and the baristas are busy over there mixing their incredibly loud drinks, and there are people laughing at the table next to you, you're going to have a lot of competing visuals and sounds. Whenever I'm recording, I have windows on two different sides of me. So my neighbors are always in this window waving at me, and I'm like, recording. And then I have cars coming by on this window. And so there's light and there's noise and there's change. So no matter what type of communication you're in, there's something that's going to interfere with you. So, of course, my teacher mode coming out in me, I recommend that you intentionally design a context for yourself where you reduce the noise and interference as much as you can. If you're hungry, get a snack. Always have a drink or something with you so that thirst doesn't distract you. If you need to, I bought myself headphones whenever I knew I was going to be recording these lectures, because I have a 55-gallon fish tank over here and it's really loud because of the water filter. So I had to physically spend money and take steps to reduce interference, get different blinds, position my computer and webcam differently in order to be able to record something in one take. You need to do the same in order to be able to listen and to note take. You need to make sure that you are in control of the noise and interference in your life so that you can be a more efficient learner. There's no sense in watching a video twice when you could have just watched it really well once. So, to move on, there are communication contexts. And the first one of these would be intrapersonal communication. And intrapersonal communication is your communication with yourself. This is your internal dialogue, the conversations you have with yourself, the opinions that you have that may or may not come out of your face. This is your self assessment, your evaluation of who you are. It's all about you. Interpersonal communication is different, because interpersonal communication is communication between people. So INTER, that prefix always means between. So between persons. Like if I say interconnection, that means connections between. Interpersonal communication is communication between persons. I would go ahead and highlight that difference since those two words are so similar and they've only got two letters difference. Make sure that you pay attention to those, because on a future test, it's really easy to get that question wrong because you just bust through the word without realizing which one of these words it is. So give yourself some help there. We also have small group communication. This is typically 3 to 12 people. So this could be a presentation group, this could be a work group, student group, but it's when a group of people are communicating simultaneously. Public communication is whenever it's generally larger than a small group. So you're going to be up there presenting in front of a larger group of people. So anything larger than 12. And mass communication is when you're reaching hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. So mass communication is like radio, TV, film. So anything to do with the internet, radio, and television is mass because it's reaching thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of people. Public communication, again, stepping back, is a smaller but still relatively large group of people. A small group is 12 and under, and then after that, it's personal, person to person, or with yourself communication. In this class, the focus you're going to hear me talk about all the time is that your communication has got to be focused on your audience. There's something known as the rhetorical situation, and your textbook defines it as the intersectionality of three components. Again, look at INTER, sectionality. sections across or between. And this is when the speaker, the audience, and then the occasion all intersect at the same time. So right now I'm the speaker, you're the audience, the occasion is this video. So that would be the rhetorical situation. And so when I do these videos, I try to keep them under 20 minutes with you in mind because no one's going to sit for very long. Some of our videos might be a little bit longer, but generally I try to keep them pretty short. And if you're doing a public speaking situation, then you're the speaker, the class would be the audience, and the occasion would be whatever context of presentation you've been asked to give. So whenever I refer to the rhetorical situation, I want you to think of these three components: speaker, audience, occasion. Every time you prepare anything for any presentation ever, focus in here, eyes to my eyes, it should be thinking about the speaker, audience, and occasion. If you know nothing else about a presentation, you should ask those three questions: who's talking, who's going to be watching, and what's happening. If you can answer those three questions, then you're already well on your way to designing a better presentation. If I was giving a lecture to 3-year-olds, you can bet it would not be through a computer. So, exigence is going to be essentially the needs of the situation. So the exigence would be kind of like the needs of your audience, the needs of the occasion, the needs of the speaker. It's when all this stuff comes together and boils and we figure out what the situation needs and how we're going to do it. Your textbook will refer to exigence quite often, so get used to that. But essentially, whenever I see exigence, I just think need. So we are almost at the end of this particular lecture, folks. We are almost there indeed. If my computer will cooperate with me, it really doesn't want to go to the next slide. The speech components that we're going to focus on individually this semester, I'm going to kind of skim these because we're going to have whole other chapters on all these components. Would of course be the content. This is the message you intend to communicate to us. And there's going to be very formal rules for structure. What you use for content is up to you, but the structure has to be pretty consistent. It's kind of once you get an outline in your head of what a speech is supposed to have, you can write any speech at any time. For example, I know that speeches have to have an intro, body, and conclusion. If I've got that, I can find a way to get from one point to the other. The macro structure is going to be generally the large components like introductions, research citations, transitions, and conclusions. Macro means large, so the macro structure is the large structure components of a presentation. Micro means small, and the microstructure of a presentation is more the wording and vocabulary and the tone, kind of the small pieces that bring a presentation alive. If there's anything for you to focus on right now, it's going to be that you could have the world's best content and be a terrible presenter because your microstructure of delivery, wording, and examples didn't fit your audience. That intersectionality of speaker, audience, and occasion, there was a mismatch somewhere. Your content can be gorgeous and still fall flat if you aren't selling it. So as you go through this, think of that macro and micro structure. How can I structure it effectively so that it's clear? But then what can I do to really get that meaning across? And the answer to that question is always going to be delivery. It is how have you chosen to represent that data? So congratulations, you have survived your first particular lecture in public speaking. If there's anything I can do to assist you, as always, I am here. You can move on to the next thing.